Is it just me or is this all kind of tilted? It's good enough. There's a chair in the frame now. That's where the computer is. Normally the computer's like down on the floor. It's upgraded to a chair now. Really exciting stuff. What's going on, everybody? My name is Mario, and today I am going to be reviewing Waldameer as well as ranking and reviewing all of their coasters. Let's talk about amusement parks, like rides in the dark. Rides right here and rides all over, but mostly coasters, We'll talk about all kind of things, but mostly coasters. I'm going to split this video up into two halves. I'm going to be splitting this video into two halves. The first half is going to be all about the coasters, and the second half is going to be about the rest of the park. So let's just go ahead and hop into the coaster section. At the time I visited Waldameer, they had 4 roller coasters. They currently have 5, although I don't think their newest one has started operating yet. Regardless, I am going to be including that new one on the list as I have ridden a exact clone of it. So speaking of that new coaster, at number 5 we have Whirlwind. Whirlwind is the new for 2020, hopefully, SBF Visa spinner figure 8 layout that the park has just added. And as I mentioned, I've been on one of these before. I've been on Rattler at Alley Cats in Hurst, Texas. These are all over the place. They're just not at any major parks. But if you've been to your fair share of family fun centers, there's a good chance that you may have seen or been on one of these. They're relatively mild family, almost kiddie coasters. They don't spin a whole lot. They don't really do a whole lot in general. They are very, very good kiddie coasters, very good starter coasters, and definitely a more tame experience than the next coaster on this list, which is going to be Ravine Flyer III. Now, Ravine Flyer III is an E&F Miler kiddie coaster, and if you've been on an E&F Miler kiddie coaster, you know that these can be a little more on the aggressive side, especially for kiddie coasters, and it's definitely going to be a little more aggressive if you're sitting in the front or back. But Ravine Flyer III specifically, very comparable to other E&F Milers, but it does have a cool aspect about it, which is that it is almost entirely over water. And you have fountains going off around it, which is pretty nice, as well as a walkway that goes underneath a really low clearance section. It doesn't do anything particularly... So good. It doesn't do anything particularly interesting that other E&F Milers do, other than its setting. Oh, and the fact that it has a nice pink and gray color scheme, which doesn't sound that appealing, I guess. But it is unique, and it definitely looks better than... All right, now that we're done with the kiddie coasters, we have a more family-oriented coaster, and this is Comet. Comet is a PTC wooden coaster with an oval layout and various airtime hills scattered in there. And I think this is a fantastic family coaster. The little ones can enjoy it because it's not too intense. The adults can enjoy it because you do get some decent floater airtime. And while statistically and just visually it doesn't seem like much, it's a 37-foot tall coaster, and its top speed is, I think, 25 miles per hour. It's surprisingly fun. But let's talk about some of the features. Now, this ride actually runs 2 trains. So if they're running the 2 trains on it at one time, then you're not going to have to wait too long for this thing, even if it does have a bit of a wait. As far as things that contribute to the actual ride experience itself, as I mentioned earlier, it does have a few floater airtime hills scattered throughout that don't do anything too insane, but you do get a nice, levitation feeling floating in between the, bum padding and the lap bars. And speaking of the lap bars, this thing has buzz bars.
Buzz bar. Oh, yeah.
Which is arguably the best thing about the ride. And these buzz bars are absolutely fantastic. This was actually my first experience with buzz bars. And if you don't know what buzz bars are, they are a lap bar. I say lap bar because it stays in a fixed position about 2 feet above your lap, and they won't come down any further or go up any higher. They stay in the exact same place throughout the entire ride, which provides an incredible, unrestricted, really open feeling, and again allows for you to really float out of your seat as opposed to just, feel like you might come out of your seat and then be held in by a more restrictive restraint. So Comet is a fun family wooden coaster with unrestricted floater airtime. All right, next up we have my second favorite not wooden coaster. That was my second favorite wooden coaster. This is my second favorite coaster in the park, and that is Steel Dragon, which, as you can tell by the title, is not a wooden coaster. This is a Maurer spinning coaster. The model is identical to quite a few others across the country, the United States. But other coasters that are the exact same model as this are Undertow at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, Spider at Lagoon, and even Laugh Track at Hershey Park. Again, these are just fun attractions, slightly more intense than Comet, and also you're going to have a little more spinning than on Whirlwind. I think it's really funny that this park only has 5 coasters now, and 2 of them are spinning coasters, but that's besides the point. Some of the features that I like about this ride is that it actually has spinning sections and non-spinning sections as well. Pretty much from the end of the station until the first section of block breaks, you're not spinning at all, so you're actually riding it like a somewhat traditional roller coaster, where you have passengers on the front of the car facing forwards and in the back of the car facing backwards. And then after that first section of block breaks is when you're going to start spinning. So kind of unique compared to other spinning coasters, which pretty much spin for the entire duration of the ride. Overall, these Maurer spinning coasters, I don't find them to spin as much as the Gerstlauers, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that might actually be a good thing for some people. So yeah, this coaster isn't really anything too special, but it does add some nice diversity to their overall ride collection, and it's fun. All right, and then at number 1, we have my personal favorite ride in the park, a ride that is often considered to be one of the best wooden coasters in the world, Ravine Flyer II. Now, what I think of when I think of Ravine Flyer II is the awesome terrain interaction that this ride has. Nice. You know what? I'm just going to pretend that it's fine. Just pretend you're on Ravine Flyer 2, man. Think of how good Ravine Flyer 2 is. Be Ravine Flyer 2. All right, I'm good. Terrain interaction. It's not too dissimilar from Iron Rattler in that respect. The quarry wall that Iron Rattler has and sort of the cliff and ravine situation that Ravine Flyer 2 has. You do have multiple moments where you're going off and coming back onto a cliff, and it is almost impossible to get footage of this ride because of the fantastic terrain. So I highly recommend, just for context, checking out a POV of this ride. Not to mention you have that highway down below, or street, whatever it is, that you fly over. You have multiple tunnels that you go into, which I think is fantastic. I think there's like 3 tunnels on this, if I'm not mistaken. You have really great pacing, except for towards the end. There's about 5 or 6, I want to say, airtime moments. It ranges from mild floater to pretty good ejector airtime, depending on where you sit. My personal favorite airtime moment of this ride is the triple up, which I don't really hear talked about all that often. You have the airtime hill going over the road on your way back towards the station, and then you have, after that, inside of a tunnel, 2 extra pops going back up the cliff towards the original elevation of the station. And then along with that, you also have a good variety of laterals as well. And I'd say this is an intense ride overall. So definitely not the first coaster you should go on at the park if you haven't been on anything too intense before. It can even be a little bit on the shaky/rough side. It really kind of just depends how you feel about rough rides. And that's sort of the first thing I don't love about this ride. Now, it does depend on where you sit, because I had some relatively smooth rides on this and some really shaky ones that kind of gave me a headache. Unfortunately, there are only wheel seats on this ride, as there are 2 rows per car. So no matter what, you're going to be sitting on a wheel seat. That being said, the front of each car I found significantly smoother than the back of each car. So try to sit on a front wheel seat as opposed to a back wheel seat. The next sort of downside is that this ride does lose its speed towards the end. The last airtime hill that the ride hits doesn't really provide any airtime at all, which can be kind of disappointing. But since everything leading up to that point is so fantastic, I don't think it really matters. It's just kind of there because instead of having straight track to get you back to the station, they figured why not throw another element in there. So I appreciate that. And then the last negative thing about this ride, which really depends on when you are there. If it is running one train, this can be a kind of painful wait. I understand that they want to reduce wear and tear, and if it's not that busy, you don't need 2 trains. But just keep in mind that if it does have one train, that line is going to move pretty slowly. Now, I mentioned the different experiences based on where you sit on this ride briefly earlier, but it's something that I really wanted to go in depth with. So first, let's talk about the pros and cons of the front, which the front row is my personal favorite place to sit. But in the front row, you have a fantastic view of Lake Erie. This park is relatively near Lake Erie, although there's not a ton of places where you can get a view of it. And Ravine Flyer II in the front row is one of the best views of Lake Erie that you can get in that park, I believe. In my opinion, the actual airtime hills themselves give better airtime. You're not going to get any airtime going down that first drop, but the subsequent hills, you get lifted up out, and I feel like it's more sustained as well as more aggressive in the front row, especially on that triple up. And the only real downside to the front row is that you're not going to get airtime going down the first drop. And you're also not going to get any airtime after that S-bend turnaround. But overall, front row is the way to go, in my opinion. Now, some of the pros of the back row, well, that first drop is going to give you ejector airtime. And the drop after the S-bend and the turnaround are also going to give you some fantastic airtime. One unfortunate thing about the back row is you really don't get time to take in the view of Lake Erie. Those airtime hills are not as oomphy. Not as much of it. It is overall also a little bit rougher in the back, but if you like really insane out of control experiences, then you might prefer the back. But regardless, wherever you sit on this ride is going to be fun. Even the middle was incredible, so I recommend riding front, middle, and back at least once. All right, and now that we are done talking about the coasters, let's talk about the park itself. So Waldameer is an amusement park. You're probably thinking, why are you telling me that this is an amusement park? Obviously, even your intro says, let's talk about amusement parks. Let's talk about amusement parks. What I mean by that is it's not really a theme park. And though it doesn't have much theming, this park is beautiful. It has fantastic landscaping. It has statues everywhere. It has flowers. Now, some of those statues are a bit creepy, but most of them are pretty good. And it's nice to just have a park that has stuff to look at while you're walking through it. And on some of the taller rides, you can also see Lake Erie. On the drop tower, it's only for a couple of seconds. I think you might be able to from the Ferris wheel. So the Lake Erie aspect of the setting of the park is not the most amazing thing in the world. But on the rides where you can see it, it is a nice little touch. This park is definitely on the smaller side. As I mentioned, they do only have 5 coasters. I really think this park is kind of comparable to a smaller version of Knoebels, where there's a lot of old school classic flat rides, as well as some newer ones. But I think this being a smaller park gives it a sort of nice family park vibe with larger thrill attractions as well. Another thing that makes Waldameer a nice park going experience is that it has a lot of trees, therefore a lot of natural shading, which if you guys know me, I'd really, really appreciate a park with decent shade. Shade, natural shade. Especially in places where it can get miserably hot in the summer. They also have like a nice little picnic area where you can just have a picnic if you want to. The park is free entry, so there is no main front gate. You can just walk in. Now, there's 2 ways to enjoy the rides at this park. You can either get a wristband or you can pay per individual attraction. Either way, this park is a really good value. I'm not 100% sure of the prices, but I am going to leave a link to Waldameer's website down below where you can find it. I do know that the points are very easy to understand. $1 equals 1 point. I know at some other parks, the point system can get kind of confusing. One thing to mention is that there are bonus points for the more that you buy. So if you're going with a big group, it might make sense to get all your points in one transaction and just split them between all of you. It might be cheaper per person, which we maybe should have done, but we weren't too smart. So be smart. The rides themselves range from about 2 points for the kiddie rides to I think 4.5 points for some of the higher thrill attractions. Now, if you're going to the park just for the coasters, it'll actually only cost you $15 to ride the 4 operating coasters that they have now and $18 to get on all 5 that they should have open by this year, which again, pretty good value. Now, if you want to spend all day at this park, or at least more than just 3 or 4 hours, then you should get the wristband option. As of making this video, the all-day wristband is $34, which gets you unlimited rides on all of the attractions. And they also have a slight discount if you visit after 5 p.m. The wristband is only $30. If you want to ride all the rides and all the water rides, that wristband is $45. Now, overall, I would recommend getting the wristband just so that you can enjoy all the attractions as many times as you want. I definitely, at the very least, recommend getting multiple rides on Ravine Flyer II. However, if the park is on the busier side and you don't feel like spending more than 3 or 4 hours at the park, it probably will be more cost effective to just use points. So again, go to the website, check it out, think about what you want to go on, how many times you want to go on it. do the math and figure out whether or not you should get the wristband or just use the points. Now that we've talked about how pricing at the park works, let's talk about some of those rides that you'll be riding with your wristband or your points. Now, I actually didn't know that Waldameer had as many rides as it did. Could have easily figured it out by just going to the website beforehand, but I really thought it only had those few coasters and a couple of flat rides. But they actually have a pretty decent collection of your traditional flat rides, like pretty sure they have a tilt-a-whirl, they have a carousel, they have a wacky shack, they have a log flume, they have a sky ride, drop tower, a decent collection of kiddie rides, and my personal favorite, they have an inverted pendulum ride. And all of those rides are going to be sort of your standard model. None of them are anything too special, but it is a pretty decent collection with some good variety. As far as the food options go at this park, I didn't get any food. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but I did notice that again, the value of the food was pretty good. So ultimately, Waldameer is definitely a park worth going to. I would recommend spending more than just a couple hours. It's a very well-kept park. It's a very nice environment, well shaded, looks pretty. I would honestly really like to go back. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you guys tell me what your ranking of the coasters at this park are, as well as your thoughts on the park overall. Let me know if you want me to do more park reviews. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Of course, 2 thumbs down if you disliked it, so I know how much you didn't like it. You can always share the video if you want, and subscribe if you want more content like this. But with all that being said, this is the end of the video.